Back to the past, and this time with a real blast from the past. It's Johnny Bravo from the era of Cartoon Network that I'm sure a few people look at and say, yep, that's a golden age.
These are our shows, all your favorite cartoons back to back.
Johnny Bravo was an instrumental aspect in the creation of both the himbo and incel movements, with the main title character being the epitome of the big, dumb, blonde, strong guy, at least aesthetically, and then being a useless flirt who lives with his mother and serially sexually harasses women. So, obviously, the instant that you heard this show had a guy in it, and then it was also animated, I'm sure that you thought to yourself, oh yeah, there must be a gender swap episode. Because there really does seem to be an obsession from creators of doing that kind of stuff, and I don't want to affirm your beliefs, because I worry that we're setting up a dangerous precedent when it doesn't happen, but you are 100% right if that's what you thought. Yeah, of course there's a gender swap episode. Why wouldn't there be?
Hey there, pretty mama.
Well, that was new.
But before we can get to the gender swap episode itself, and we can get to discussing what that means in the broader trans conversation, some of you might have also noticed that Valentine's Day is coming up soon, a fact that is super relevant for the sponsor of today's video, Lilo. I know I'm surprised it took this long for me, a queer channel, to get a luxury pleasure brand to back me, but it's finally happened. And what better time for you to look at obtaining one of their luxury pleasure products for either your own or a partner's enjoyment. With Lilo's ultimate collection crafted to stimulate sense, spark desires, and invite endless exploration, there is no better way to spend the romance season than engaging in some good old sex positivity with your bodies. The store already has some fantastic deals for Valentine's, but with my unique code LilyS10, which you can find a link in the description or see on the screen right now, you can also enjoy an extra 15% off whatever order you want, including those that already have a discount on them. Double discount! And I was also given one of the top products from their line to display here, the Enigma Double Sonic, a hot new A-spot vibrator for all the people who want that kind of stimulation. That's right, you've heard of the G-spot, but nowadays we're looking at the A-spot, a significantly harder to get to part of the vagina behind the G-spot, which with the unique sonic tip on the Enigma, you can finally reach. The Enigma also has a sleek premium design with two stylish colorways so that you can get it on in a fashionable method, and you could even connect it via Bluetooth to the Lilo app to engage in hands-free isolated enjoyment. So remember, that's the code LilyS10 at the links you can find in the description or pinned comment to enjoy a stackable 15% discount on your next purchase from the Lilo store, and treat yourself or someone else this Valentine's season. With all that said, it's now time to get back to the video that I'm getting sponsored for, as we discuss the Johnny Bravo episode wherein Johnny gets force-femmed and learns a valuable lesson about both himself and the opposite gender, titled Which A Woman. So our episode begins with Johnny walking down the street doing his usual thing, i.e. gassing himself up and making a big deal about how attractive he is, before ultimately getting distracted looking at an attractive lady and decided to hit on her. The attractive lady in question being, well, Madame Voila, a representation of a consistent Romani stereotype as a fortune teller. Honestly, we've got a lot of sexism to work through in this video. I didn't expect us to have to also dabble in a little bit of racial stereotyping too, but frankly, there isn't a huge amount more to say than that this was just a recurring character archetype that appeared in a lot of American media. The magical, witchy Romani traveller lady who would put a curse on someone if she was wronged. A lot of shows did it, including one of my problematic favourites, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and so it's not really that surprising to see it being repeated here. Many media stereotypes, after all, are just the repeated ideas that became part of the cultural nomenclature and end up becoming accepted by the audience as immediately recognizable, despite the fact that we should all maybe question the themes or biases that go into their existence. Johnny hits on the lady, and in doing just what he does, manages to annoy the ever-loving shit out of her. Enough so that she casts a spell on him that freezes him in place, calls out what he seems to so highly think of himself as, to which Johnny decides that now is the optimal time to engage in some sexism by completely ignoring what she's going on about, a pretty bold decision seeing as he has currently been levitated off the ground by her magical powers, but I guess nobody in the history of ever would accuse the character of Johnny Bravo of being smart or reading the room.
Can you go now?
Reader. Do you also read biceps, triceps?
To this, though, Madame Voila slaps him into the wall and drops that curse on him. The curse being one of those classic kind of just desserts punishments, wherein Johnny is gonna get transformed into a woman and learn all the troubles of being a woman, with the caveat that if he finally discovers what it really means to be a woman, then he will be de-womaned.
Into woman. And as woman, you will learn what it is to be woman.
And yeah, try and ignore the music that's playing during this curse scene. It's just part of that stereotype that we were talking about earlier. I know it all seems a little bit insensitive these days, but I don't think there is much more to it in this show than the fact that they were just using a Romani fortune teller, and so that came with all the baggage that had been lumped with those characters for decades before this point. And so Johnny wakes up in his bed, the curse, I guess, knocking him out and also transporting him back to his room, which is rather nice of it, all things considered. But when Johnny starts his regular getting up routine of slapping his alarm and walking to the bathroom, we notice a few differences that Johnny doesn't seem to pick up on at first. Namely, his much more petite hands and a big lock of hair that falls over his face. Until finally, Johnny catches himself in the mirror, hits on himself, and then starts not really putting the pieces together.
Hey there, pretty mama.
As we've covered, Johnny is thick as a brick, so he doesn't immediately catch on to what's going on here. Instead, merely only being confused as to why his external voice doesn't match his internal voice, a thing I'll talk about in a second, and then also being confused as to why there is an attractive woman in his mirror staring back at him.
Now what's a frumpy yet oddly attractive chick doing in my mirror?
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. His character being stupid is really iconic for why people find him so funny, so I guess this is just what they have to do. But on that note of the internal voice and external voice, remember the key important theme here to understand, that Johnny Bravo is a man, is comfortable as a man, and has not dealt with gender dysphoria at all, and still views himself internally as a man. And so it makes complete sense that his voice that he uses in his head would still be the masculine voice that is associated with regular male Johnny, and not the more high-pitched voice that we heard come out when he tried to speak.
Where'd you go?
I hear you.
Come on out!
What?
You!
Who?
Me!
Me who?
Me you!
It's a subtle clue as to the distinction here between the way that Johnny is physically presenting and the way that he is conceptualizing himself within his own mind, and that's a good thing for establishing a notion of gender identity that is effective when considering transgender identity and how it represents. It's all about building the initial foundations for people to learn to see from, and to influence the way they view things in a manner that aligns with the baseline view of gender that we need people to get on board with for trans stuff to make more sense. Anyways, back to the episode at hand. Johnny still hasn't figured out that the chick in the mirror is in fact him, and begins assuming that there is a new dating fad where you copy each other because, as I mentioned, this show cannot hammer home hard enough how fucking idiotic Johnny is. And it really makes you start to question, how this guy functions.
Hello, 911 emergency. There's a handsome guy in my house.
I mean, I guess we don't really see him with much of a career or hobbies beside hitting on women and assuming that his natural good looks will carry him through life, so maybe Johnny Bravo isn't functioning all that well at all, but this keeps going for a solid minute longer, with Johnny seeing himself not talking much as a sign of being hard to get, and then getting excited over the sound of his own new voice as a sign that the woman is still around him. And trust me, a minute of runtime is a big deal in a show that only has 10-minute long episodes. I guess they really just want you to know how stupid Johnny Bravo is, or they didn't have much content to milk out of the concept, and so felt that a long time spent on this was the ideal methodology of carrying the episode along. I mean, it lets us have more time seeing how Johnny treats women when one of those women is himself, and so builds up the idea that he is going to hopefully learn something by the end of this, though much like other gender swap episodes in the past, such as Fairly Odd Parents or Kind of Boy Meets World, the morals that are picked up and the lessons that are instilled swiftly seem to have vanished by the next time an episode swings around, thanks to the way that many of them reset most of their character development, except for what are considered gigantic big moments. And I guess a gender swap is just not on that list of things, despite how much of a change that really should be considered when you take longer than like 2 seconds to run through all the implications of it. Seriously, imagine if you gender swapped right now, with everything that would entail physically, emotionally, and mentally. It's a lot to have happen all of a sudden, and to then have to go and live even a short time under that raises so many questions about gender and how we perceive it and how we act it that these shows barely ever really touch on. I gotta watch Ranma 1/2 sometime, I guess, and see how that makes a show out of the entire concept. Johnny finally figures out that he is a chick, however, when he looks down his own shirt and sees his breasts, and then says the most chill and relaxed line I could imagine someone having to the sudden realization that their gender has been swapped.
Oh man, I'm a chick! What's up with that?
A chill and relaxed line that is further emphasized in that context by the fact that he remembers afterwards why he got turned into a chick.
Woman, you will continue to be.
Oh, man.
Dude is so stupid that he straight up forgot the whole magical Romani fortune teller incident and just kinda went about his life like he didn't just get levitated into a wall and knocked out with a curse to bed. God, Johnny is almost too lo-fi, like dangerously lo-fi living. A statement that is further expounded by Johnny taking this new information and this realization that he has been literally cursed into forced feminization, and then sees if he still has his little dance-like funky moves, which he does.
But what about...
Oh yeah, I still got it.
There's also a further point here on that thing I discussed earlier, where Johnny talks about how he still sounds right in his own head, mentioning in explicit detail that idea that his gender identity, the right way he feels about himself, is as a guy, and that has not changed internally for him. Unfortunately for Johnny, his attempt to quickly learn the lesson about what being a woman means falls apart, as the lesson is, unsurprisingly, not the misogynistic view that women are meant to be there for looking hot. Who'd have guessed? Johnny then heads to his mother's room, because remember he lives with his parents, so that he can give himself a makeover and look good for going out and finding that lesson he is searching for. And we see some of that essentialist nature that many gender swaps lean into. An essentialist nature which kinda goes against how many of them are trying to get kids to learn to treat the other gender better and to not assume things about them.
I don't think I've ever noticed all the pretty floral patterns in Mama's room.
Such attention to detail.
Like, Johnny immediately notices how his mother puts her room together better, and the patterns that she uses, and considers how he wants to do the same thing to his own room now. I mean, this is some more of that subtle bullshit that does feed the idea that women and men see the world differently innately, that it's their bodies or their hormones that make them view things in such a specific way. Something which is kinda bullshit. Estrogen doesn't make someone better at home decorating or more conscious of floral choices. Anyone with any level of hormones can be good at both of those things. Johnny, though, proceeds to somewhat discover a lesson about female beauty standards, when he realises how much work he has to go through to meet the expected norms of what society wants women to look like. Waxing his legs and tweezering his moustache hairs / eyebrows to fit into the vision that Johnny himself is still employing from his internal masculine perspective of prettiness.
Ow! Singing! Oh! No!
Johnny also does his makeup and dresses himself in an outfit that is what I would describe as someone trying their best, all things considered. And then we get more of that essentialism as he talks about noticing more of the nice things in the world, like butterflies and flowers and children playing, now that he is seeing it through women glasses, rather than, I guess, his glasses, which are obsessed with only looking at hot women. Like, I get what it is trying to say as an episode. I assume we all get what it is trying to say, that men are hyperfixated on staring at women to the degree that they ignore everything else. You know, these guys thinking with their dicks and all that jazz. But that's just kind of sexist in a different way, and feels as if it's encouraging the exact behaviours that it should be arguing against.
Look at those happy children playing! Life sure is different through chick-colored glasses.
These aren't ideas that are tied directly into your bodies. There are plenty of dudes who are thinking about things other than women and fucking, and maybe if we had more examples of that as not just the norm, it would encourage more men to seek out fulfillment from areas that are not just perving on women. Yes, I am saying that oft-repeated stereotypes in media are a bad thing that not only encourage outside views to think of a group a certain way, but also influence that very group to act the way that they are told they should act by those stereotypes. It's not exactly my most radical stance ever, but I do still stand by it. Johnny declares to himself and the world that he is Jenny while displaying some of his moves, only to deal with the guys around him laughing at him for presumably how he looks, leading to Johnny watching another woman, I guess. I mean, Johnny is still a guy for all intents and purposes that matter, he just has a woman's body for right now, so another woman doesn't make a lot of sense. Whatever. He sees another woman getting harassed by men on the street, and decides to investigate what she is doing different to get all the guys checking her out, seeming to be jealous of the harassment because I guess he hasn't really dealt with it or felt its impact for himself yet.
What do they got that I don't got?
Grass is always greener on the other side, I suppose, being the idea driving this concept. He feels as if he put in some effort and so wants appreciation for that, without really reckoning with how that appreciation is gonna come at him. He learns a little bit of the walk, but still finds himself getting laughed at by men as he passes, which is, frankly, rude as fucking shit. And maybe the lesson here is that guys need to stop making a woman's appearance a thing they feel the need to involve themselves so blatantly in, before a guy who runs a clothing store yoinks Johnny, or Jenny at this point, I guess, off the street, and gives her a talking to about how the clothing she wears can really define how she looks, and that inside she has a lioness ready to reveal its claws. Grrr.
Is a lioness waiting to unleash her inner...
And with that, it's time for the montage, with the montage music. Hell yeah! And with his work done, the clothier sends Jenny out into the world with a wishing well and a wave. Dunno what the hell his deal was, except for, I guess, wanting all women to be dressed splendidly. He doesn't even creep on Jenny, except for a little bit. He just wants her to look good for her self-esteem, I suppose. Who is this guy? And how does he fit into the greater narrative at play here? I mean, I guess his job is to get Jenny dressed in good clothes, and so... Tick did that.
Now go and be beautiful.
Jenny seems to take this as the lesson being that if you're attractive, you can get whatever you want, which is quickly shown to not be the lesson at all, and all it really does is piss off a bunch of what I guess the episode wants us to think of as unattractive women who watch her announce this fact in the middle of the street.
Suck it to me, powers that be.
This is all really kind of sexist. Like, defining women by attractiveness in the episode about how, like, we shouldn't be judging women, or that should be doing that, is bad, frankly. I think Witch A Woman might be one of the worst gender swap episodes I've seen yet. It doesn't seem to be doing a good moral at all. Who knows? But we move on to our major point of the episode now, as Jenny swiftly discovers that looking good as a woman outside in the world leads her into a world of harassment from a whole bunch of guys. Unwanted attention that makes her feel angry and upset and hurt.
That's enough!
At this realization though, Jenny then notices all the other women dealing with creeps just like she is, all getting angry at the way that men treat them like a piece of meat with no real consideration of their feelings or their desire to just exist without getting surrounded by dudes trying to bang them, and a question about what on earth is being the point of being a woman if being hot just leads to you getting harassed for it, transforms into a musical number about the power of womanhood and women sticking by each other. A real feminist anthem for the ages, which does sort of build itself upon the sexist notion that all men suck and are terrible.
You think that men are pigs, I say we all know that's a fact.
So, like some kind of second wave feminism shenanigans, which posits gender as a fight between the two major binary ones. Something which kinda led to the transphobia and rampant misandry that we deal with today, and, well, let's just say that it didn't exactly do feminism any massive solids in the long run, except for just kind of fueling a gender war which didn't really need more fire added to it. Like, literally, the lesson of this song, and the lesson that Johnny is apparently supposed to learn, is that girls are smart.
That girls are smart.
Something which I don't really feel like was called into question necessarily, or something that got dealt with a lot. I mean, I guess it's opposed to the objectification of women in a roundabout way, but I feel like that doesn't have to necessarily be dependent on the view that women are all intelligent. Stupid women also deserve to be treated with respect and considered as humans and not just hit on. You could write that on a t-shirt if you want with Lily 2025, because I'll stand by that sentiment. Everyone deserves to be treated like a person. The crowd begins cheering Jenny at the end because she repeats the line of girls are smart. And then Johnny internally, I guess, picks up on that message and immediately transforms back into a guy, wearing the very tight clothes that he just put on and surrounded by women who had, I guess, just welcomed a new member to their big girl power movement, only for her to transform into a dude. And then Johnny proceeds to sexually harass every single woman in that crowd by implying that they all want to have sex with him, and that he can do it with all of them, before knocking himself out and waking up in his bed as a dude.
There's more than enough Johnny to go around.
Assuming that the entire thing was just a dream despite wearing the clothes that he had on when he was a woman during that day. Yep, that's right. Johnny Bravo is too stupid to learn any gender lesson that might go his way, and the superpower of forced feminization isn't even enough to get over that. I mean, presumably based on what the episode was telling us, he learned the lesson briefly, or at least long enough for the curse to be lifted, before I guess the women are smart thing stopped working, and he returned to being a stupid dude. So I suppose the resolution is also based on the very gender essentialist notion of intelligence between the sexes, an idea that doesn't really do any favours for any side at all.
I get it. I think I just learned a lesson. Girls are smart.
So, what's the trans lesson here? Because I've got to bring this all back to its importance to the trans community, as that's how I've built this entire fucking channel, in case you might have missed that. Seriously, have a look through. I clearly have one big old mission statement. Well, let's address the obvious first and foremost, which is that this isn't a trans episode. It's not billing itself as one, and nowhere does it mention the word or come close to exploring the definitive themes of that community through the storyline it develops. But that doesn't mean that it can't still be a trans episode, because at the end of the day, any creation, any media, is 50% what the creator puts into it, and 50% what the audience takes away. And having an episode at all where a person goes from being one gender to suddenly being the other, and having to deal with that, is absolutely something that triggers those egg-cracking moments where a trans person considers themselves in that same position and looks at what their reaction to that would be.
Well, that was new.
Transmedia is so often just whatever begins that process of questioning who we present ourselves as, and how we think of ourselves internally, and whether those two align in a gender sense. And so anything which crosses those boundaries, anything which explores that nebulous area of body and sex and gender at all, does some work towards getting people at least thinking about that. It might not, especially in the case of Johnny Bravo here, be putting in any intense foundational work itself to discuss or explore those questions, but it is putting the chinks in the blockade that goes up for a lot of people on even contemplating this in the first place, especially at a period of time when we just weren't getting that much transmedia. At a further level than just that, Johnny Bravo's Which A Woman does fall back, as I mentioned, on something which is transphobic and does occur a lot in gender swap episodes. Specifically that tying of how someone acts in a gendered way to the body that they have. A notion which fuels many of those TERFs or anti-trans arguments which posit that because of how someone is born, they must exist in a certain way, and that that is unchangeable.
Is this what being a woman is about? What does it all mean?
As I said, it's not a wild thing that only Johnny Bravo has engaged in. In fact, it's really based on old school established stereotypes that crafted these notions of men and women as all being deep down the same as one another, and fundamentally, diametrically opposed to the other gender, a stereotype which fuels sexism and a lack of empathy for one another by its division of gender and sex into such distinctively uncrossable camps. Uncrossable unless you have Romani curses or fairy godparent magic cast on you.
Like I'd wish I was a girl!
Despite my initial happiness and continued happiness at the way that Johnny Bravo indicated the internal gender identity of Johnny as still being himself and of being a man, we saw that gender identity being influenced towards expected women norms by the body that he now occupied. Something which doesn't necessarily reflect the reality of the situation. A reality which is that you would deal with massive amounts of dysphoria the longer that you remained in that body, and felt as if your internal self didn't align with your external interpreted reality. And so this feels like another case of a piece of trans-connected media, trans-connected in the way that trans people might look back on it and see it as fundamental to their coming out of the closet and discovering themselves. Well, that trans-connected media actually failing to really do the work of considering gender as anything but set in stone and following established conditions for those who are stuck in it. It's trans awakenings from inherently untrans-friendly sources. And if that ain't a queer as fuck experience, then I don't know what the hell is. And it's nice that we're still getting modern versions of that. Looking at you, Amelia Perez, and yes, I know, it's a big thing right now, but my general rule is to cover anything that's gone viral months afterwards to make sure I can get the full story together and not rush my opinion just to try and catch the algorithm. I'd rather wait for the algorithm to catch up to me, if you get my drift. Now, with that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, or at least I hope I was suitable background noise for whatever you're actually focusing on at the time. I'm sure it's chores or games or just sitting on the couch zoning out thinking about how bad things are in America right now. But if you did enjoy this video, the best way to show that is by going to my Patreon or my Ko-Fi, where you can subscribe and help support the channel. All the money on there goes towards helping to pay for things that I need to have paid to keep things running. Stuff like power, internet, food, rent, and my cat bill. That cat being this cat right here. Merlin, who always likes to jump up onto my shoulder whenever I put him up there, and with his very, very big claws. The names of those the names of those in the 5 grown up category should be scrolling past the screen right now, and I really appreciate everyone on there for helping to keep this channel going. It means a lot to me, and it means an awful lot because it does give me an indication that people like what I do, despite how difficult it might be to keep going in the face of the YouTube algorithm not really pushing my videos that much. I mean, being on the internet is hard enough as it is, and trying to do it as a trans content creator is a hell of a lot harder. But seeing people like what I make and seeing people recognize the value of having someone go through all of the trans and trans-related media and try and discuss them does make me want to keep going. Which is great because I've got a hell of a lot more videos to come. Trust me, with all the recommendations I have, this is going to go on for probably a decade or so, but when it's finally done, I can make one gigantic 15-hour video talking about the entirety of trans representation in media, and then with that done, I guess I will return to my slumber until the trans community once more needs me to awaken, like some kind of King Arthur allegory bullshit. Regardless, as I said, a huge thanks to everyone who supports my channel, especially through these difficult times. I know it's quite hard right now, and I absolutely encourage people, if they need to focus on themselves rather than supporting me. But if you have the money to spare, I very much appreciate it. But I also want to give a huge thanks to everyone who watches this video and does all the YouTube stuff of liking, commenting, sharing, going and looking at my other videos, which is a big deal for YouTube. They kind of enjoy it if you click on the content creator's next video, because it kind of shows that you're interested in the channel. And I have tons and tons of videos on there covering a whole range of topics that I'm sure people would love to see. So, you know, if you haven't seen them already, go look at some videos. There's even a 10-hour Harry Potter video on there, which is... it's a lot. It's me talking about the entirety of everything in Harry Potter, so, you know, have a look at that one. But before I keep rambling in this outro where I don't script it, I just let myself go, which is a bad fucking move, I want to say yet again, huge thanks to everyone who is involved in keeping this channel going at any point in any way, and I hope that you all have a great day.